All right, Iqbal, last week we talked about building prioritization frameworks. Now, within the CRO space, there are lots of sort of pre-built prioritization systems like Pi and ICE and other things like that that are sort of popularized. Um, and a lot of times there's been pushback against those because they're not seen as objective.
Mhm.
Do you think that that is true?
Well, I don't know about ICE, and that again, that has not aged well as a prioritization name. But I know about Pi, and I think Pi gets a bit of a bad rep and gets misrepresented, I feel, a lot as being subjective.
What
And I
gets
think
what gets misrepresented about it?
I think it's because so basically PI stands for potential, importance, and ease, and the potential part I think is the one that gets misrepresented because the potential part is definition. The definition is how much improvement can be made with on a particular page or whatever particular test, and that is often feels like subject. It feels
It
subjective,
feels like
and
it's subjective because that's really like a summarization of the work that goes into generating that score. Like if you're just looking
yeah,
at it on a surface level, like, oh, potential importance ease. Well, what's the potential? What do I think it is? Like, right.
yeah,
So
exactly, exactly,
it gets misapplied
yeah,
because it's like just reading out the terms that the acronym stands for
yeah.
doesn't fully describe the actual process.
Yeah, yeah. And if you read his book, you should test that.
Whose book?
Chris Goward.
Okay.
So Chris Goward, who originator of the Pi framework, also of the he's wider funnel
He
guy,
started
isn't he?
Wider Funnel, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Who got acquired
So
by Accenture, I think, and then
yeah,
but
but yeah, yeah. But he is the his sort of interpretation or his definition of it is how much improvement. And if you and in that chapter, he just goes into it a lot more deeper in the book that is, and in the course because I did the course when I first started doing A/B testing, and his course was really good, and he kind of like goes even further from the principles from the book, and the perspective is this is like, well, you're given this definition, but it's up to you to actually apply it. And how you apply it, like how do you define how much improvement can be made? Well, one thing that he points out is that before you even start A/B testing, you should be going through all of your test pages, or the pages that you're going to be testing on, the test areas that you're going to be running tests on, and you should be ranking those pages and those test areas. And when it comes to the P score, what you're really should be looking at is how much improvement can be made to these particular pages or test areas. And a good sort of methodology that he taught in his workshop is to kind of use the drop-off rate of a page as a proxy for how much improvement can be made. So if a
right.
page has got high drop-off rate, then there's a lot of improvement that can be made, and that can be quite objective as a
Starting point.
point.
That's a measurable, quantifiable metric that is objective. Like how many
Exactly.
people come to this page and then don't do the thing that you want them to do on that page. Like what's the percentage? Is it 90% do it? 2% do it? Well, if 90% of the people that are coming to the page are completing the behavior, that's probably a page that's functioning pretty well. And so you don't want to, time spent on that one is going to be more like squeezing blood from a stone versus the page with 2% of the people converting, right? There's more opportunity on that page. And so, that's an important word there, like opportunity. Like maybe opportunity is a better word than potential, but OIE is not a word, so it's not as catchy to say as like the Pi framework.
Yeah. And the way I like to think about potential is like a gap. Is like how big is that gap from what is currently how the page is currently performing versus how it could be or should be performing. how big is that gap? Because you're obviously not going to get 100% conversion on every single page. So what is that gap? And it also kind of opens up the checkout pages into the mix as well, because checkout pages traditionally have a low drop-off rate because they're so far up the funnel. So the conversion rate from checkout to payment is usually quite small, but there could be a big potential there, and it's and the potential is based on the gap. Of that gap, how much do we know about what that gap is? And for that, you could fill it. You could do some research like qualitative research and user testing, user feedback, get user feedback and stuff like that to basically quantify the opportunity that exists on certain pages. So it doesn't need to be always like a drop-off rate. It can be
accumulation of research evidence, like as an example, right? Like you do usability testing, and it discovers that there's 10 points of friction on the checkout page, but only 2 points of friction on the cart page. Well, then the cart page is probably pretty straightforward. Like users aren't confused by it. They understand it. They can get past it pretty well. Whereas they get to the checkout page, here's issue A, here's issue B, here's issue C, D, E, F, et cetera, right? There's a lot more identifiable problems on this page, which is showing more potential for improvement.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there is this misconception that just because the definition says how much improvement, that people just take that as a jumping off point to just kind of go, oh well, I think there's probably X, Y, Z, but there's a lot more to it where you have to bring objectivity to that score. So there is a lot of work that you have to do to make it objective. And even though that's not well traditionally, like definitely well defined, like saying you must do this, because every single company will be slightly different in the way that you kind of determine what the
opportunity is, right?
What the opportunity
depends
is.
on what the business goal is, and
exactly,
and things like that and stuff. So
what about you? Do you think like people do think pi is subjective as a framework?
I think there's a bit of stigma in that sense of like, oh, it's not good because of the oversimplification of the branding. Of it. I went through that almost same journey myself early on, like because I started off with Optimizely, and Chris was a big, like, he spoke at Opticon a bunch of times, so like I saw him do presentations and things like that, and they had, Optimizely had a whole bunch of articles from him, even specifically about pi, like on their blog and things, and I read them and absorbed them, and that's how I got started with prioritization frameworks as well, was using pi. And I made that same fallacy as the starting point, where it's like, okay, I have a scoring system, so I have potential, importance, and ease, and they're on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm just self-ranking each of these different things, right? And as I was using the system for a month or 2 or 3 or whatever, I came to that realization of like, I always seem to be giving all of the scores within a generally same narrow band. Like, this is a 7, this is an 8, this is a 9, and so it became like 10 is too granular term. So let's truncate it down to 5. And then the same thing happened, and it was like, oh no, these need some sort of objective measurement principles applied to them instead. So like I came to that same conclusion myself through experiential learning.
And I think that's a really good topic for another chat, actually, because that is a problem that I see a lot, is that a lot of tests come out scoring the same, especially when you got 10 tests all on the same page and same area. They all score about the same. So how do you differentiate between them? And this is where you need to throw in some more criteria to your pi scoring, where pi only gets you so far, and then you need to add your own criteria to get further definition and further sort of differentiate all these different types of tests. So I think that is, I think that is like an area that is rich to explore, certainly with topics. And I think when it
self-reflection and analysis of your own prioritization system, like, is it actually working and accomplishing? Like maybe you look at it every, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something, and be like, are all of our scores within a really narrow band? So like, say we're doing like a 10-point score for each metric, but we're looking at our prioritization, and everything's scoring between a 7 and a 9. Well, that's not helpful, because all of your average, right, all of your rankings are within this really narrow band, so it's not accomplishing what you want it to do.
And I think in his workshop, he does go into it in a lot more detail, Chris Coward does, in terms of like applying weights and stuff like that to pages, to test areas, and really making it scientific, really making it objective. Because having read the book, I kind of got the same impression that it's kind of subjective, and prioritization of potential is kind of much more about how much potential do we think that test has. Whereas doing the workshop, he kind of, through the tasks that he goes through to kind of weight each of the tests and stuff like that, it kind of becomes really evident that what he's getting across is that they need to be objective. These pages need to be pre-scored, and they need to be objectively pre-scored, and all of your scoring needs to have some objective basis and some weight that can be applied to really prioritize effectively. So
like that's the same way that I came to the realization, was that I'm running A/B tests, so I'm trying to make, or at least help clients make decisions objectively based on the results of these experiments that I'm running. But then I'm using a subjective system to decide which test to run next, and the dissonance in my head was like when I finally recognized, like, oh, this prioritization system needs to be objectively determined. Like, it needs to have some sort of like numbers applied to it in a systematic way, rather than I think this one is a 7, so I'll give it a 7. I think this one's a 5, I'll give it a 5.
But that's our view anyway. Let us know what you think. Do you use Pi? Do you think it's subjective? How do you use it? And how do you make sure your prioritization for your tests are objective? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.